So far, Red Hood seems to be the most controversial playable character of Gotham Knights, and I can't say that I blame anyone. This is me being somewhat nitpicky, but I feel like this is a fair nitpick, and it's one that's been shared by many others. I think Red Hood looks like a blast to play as in some respects. There have been some gameplay pieces of footage shown where he leaps off of his bat bike, grapples onto an enemy, and starts just going to town beating them up. That's a cool move. A lot of his ranged attacks look really cool and interesting, and there's a handful of combos that he can pull off that also look really stylish and fun to watch. However, when he gets into that hand-to-hand combat like the other knights, it looks rather clunky and slow. The other characters like Nightwing and Batgirl and even Robin, we haven't seen much of Robin, but even from what we've seen of him, don't bother me as much. They appear to be a different style of combat than the Arkham games had. It's moving away from the free flow combat system and moving more toward an RPG Spider-Man style of combat, which I'm okay with. I think it looks fun still. But Red Hood doesn't necessarily look like he accommodates that style of gameplay as well as the others. Again, I think that once we get our hands on this character and once we start modifying him to be a very ranged character, I don't know that we'll feel the same way. I think he's going to be a lot of fun to play as like the other knights, and I feel like with Red Hood, he is definitely the most wait and see character for me. The developers, many of them say that they actually prefer Red Hood over any of the other characters, and I'm hoping that it's just a case of the game doesn't look as fun as it is to play in those Red Hood demos that they've shown. I really want to like this character, I really want to like playing as this character, and so far from what they've shown, they've been very tight-lipped on him from a narrative perspective because they've just been tight-lipped on everything in the story. And from the gameplay, unfortunately, I just haven't been as impressed with what I've seen. Additionally, his traversal mechanic is the strangest out of any of the knights. As we all know, this version of Jason Todd was resurrected from the Lazarus Pit, but unlike most versions of the story, he's developed some supernatural abilities where he can literally jump on thin air. Now, I understand the gameplay design choice for this, because when you're making a game like Gotham Knights and you have these four characters who are very distinct and play very distinctly from each other, you still need to have some connectivity in terms of their level of abilities. So for example, when Batgirl is gliding across the city, you need to give Robin something that he can do that will match that gliding ability in terms of getting around the city. He needs to be able to get around the city as fast and effectively as Batgirl, and the same is true of Red Hood. Red Hood, of course, has the grappling hook like every other character, but when you start looking at what else he could pull off in terms of another traversal technique, it's harder than the other knights. Nightwing has his glider, Robin has his short-range teleportation, which, if I'm being honest, I'm finding harder to suspend disbelief for than Red Hood having some mystical abilities. Batgirl has gliding, so that's easy. So when you start really developing the combat and the traversal, you have to find ways to make each character feel distinct from each other, but you also need to find ways to make them evenly matched so that when you switch between characters in the game, you don't suddenly feel like you're downgrading. Every character needs to feel as valuable as each other. So I understand why they needed to find a way to give Red Hood some cool abilities. And to tell you the truth, I mean, we're talking about a character who was literally resurrected. I'm not having a hard time suspending my disbelief that he could have some supernatural abilities when he came back, even though there isn't tons of precedent set for those abilities in the comics. Now, one thing that I'll bring up that I brought up a bit in the Batgirl explained video as well for Red Hood, but I just want to touch on it again because I think it's relevant for both characters. I think Red Hood and Batgirl could have an interesting bond that we don't usually see between these two characters in Batman media. Both of them were brutalized by Joker. In Jason's case, he was literally murdered by Joker before he was brought back to life by Ra's al Ghul. We don't know if that's the exact way that they're going to go about telling this story in Gotham Knights, but I would be surprised if there are drastic changes like the characters involved in these stories in the Gotham Knights lore. I'd imagine that Joker and Ra's al Ghul, again, were the ones responsible for killing and resurrecting Jason Todd respectively. But when he's back, when Batman is dead and Batgirl is there as well, recovering from her wounds that Joker inflicted when she was paralyzed by him, and she's learning to walk again, she's been rehabilitated physically so that she can fight crime again. it could be really compelling to see the bond between them. They've both lost a father figure, and they are both recovering from wounds inflicted by the Joker. The Joker allegedly is not in this game, according to the developers. We'll see if that ends up being true, because that is a story I have heard before from developers developing Batman mythology-based games. But even if he's not, I think the shadow of Joker will hang over this game, similarly to how the shadow of Batman will hang over this game. And it will be interesting to see how these two characters heal from the trauma inflicted upon them, and more interestingly, how these two could potentially bond over that shared trauma and the shared recovery. So those are my thoughts on Red Hood. I think he's interesting, and from a gameplay perspective, I am a little bit concerned, but narratively, I think there's a lot they can do with him. I'm a huge fan of Stephen O. Young, the voice actor. He was Mr. Negative in Spider-Man, and he knocked it out of the park there. He's doing great with Red Hood here, so I am really excited to see this character in the story, and I hope that he's really fun to play as, even if it's through just the ranged attacks. But please be sure to let me know in the comments below what you think about Red Hood. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we will see you guys in the next one.